But with that being said, welcome everybody. I hope everybody's having a really great Monday. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Annie Mitchell, and I am a student staff associate at Cal Zero Waste. And today we're going to be discussing reuse in the age of COVID-19. So before we get started, I just want to share a little bit about myself. I teach a course at Berkeley, which is basically a 101 everything you need to know about the planet crash course. We cover everything from waste streams to food systems to decarbonization and the circular economy. I also run the Refreshing Refills program under Cal Zero Waste to encourage the UC Berkeley community and the greater Bay Area community to refill and reuse. And then I also direct the ASUC Sustainability Commission. And this semester, we're running a variety of different campaigns, including a restaurant sustainability rating system, an environmental justice and education project, and a speaker panel with a topic on environmental justice and intersectionality with BIPOC communities. So before we start, I'd like to just give a little agenda of what we're talking about. So first, I'm going to give an overview of Cal Zero Waste, and then we will jump into the presentation with a short history lesson. I will provide you with short-term and long-term action items, a vision for a hopeful future, and resources for reuse. And then we're going to end our discussion in this presentation with some questions and some breakout rooms to get everybody thinking. So a little bit about Cal Zero Waste and who we are. We're a campus department responsible for the Zero Waste by 2020 and beyond goal, as well as the facility services across campus. Our team consists of dedicated part-time student staff and full-time staff members, who are part of our operations on campus. They service the bins, and then we also have full-time truck drivers. So in these photos here, you can see an eclectic assortment of small bins without much informative signage and a lack of consistency in the waste streams provided. Inefficiency in our waste systems is a cost of labor, resources, and vehicles to collect and maintain. And with the COVID-19 pandemic happening, we want to reduce the amount of contact, so we are centralizing bins to help protect our staff. So our approach to strategic zero waste planning and implementation includes a standardized set of bins, which includes cans and bottles recycling, composting, landfill, and paper recycling across all of our campus buildings. For offices and dorm rooms, we are providing desk-side bins that have large compost and recycling bins with small landfill bins attached, as you can see in that bottom left picture. And then we're also implementing large wheeled carts and large compost barrels for areas that collect a lot of waste, which you can see in the middle and the bottom right pictures. So with all of that being said, though, I want to learn a little bit about you guys. So I'm going to put a Zoom poll up with these questions here so we can get to know a little bit of each other and get a better idea of how reuse is happening in your community. And then I think we'll just do like a little quick round of like popcorn intros to get to know each other. Okay, I launched the poll. Are you guys able to see it?
I can see it.
Cool, thank you. I'll give you guys like 30 seconds to do this. It's a really simple poll. Okay, so it looks like 75% of us are students at Berkeley. 75% of us are in Berkeley right now. Let's see if I can share the results with you guys. And then, okay, so 50% of you guys can use reusables at grocery stores where you're located. 25 says no, and another 25 says not sure. I'm in Berkeley right now, and I think for most of the grocery stores, I can start using my reusable bags again. And then all of you guys said you're hopeful for the future of reuse, which makes me super, super, super happy. That's great. Awesome. Well, it's super nice to have all of you guys here. Thank you so much for coming. And without further ado, let's get into it. So to begin this presentation, I want to get you all familiar with a short history lesson about the history of reuse and single-use plastics. So environmentalists for decades now have been advocating for the end of single-use plastic and disposable production. In response, the plastic industry, in the form of a ton of super PACs, has poured thousands of dollars into funding election campaigns to incentivize politicians to vote against measures addressing the environmental concern of plastic. In the 2018 election cycle alone, the plastic industry spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund federal candidates and halt the movement against banning single-use plastics. The COVID-19 pandemic has only helped the plastic industry frame a narrative around reusables as unsanitary. The plastic industry published a letter to the CDC speaking out against plastic bans as a public safety risk. And when quarantine hit in March, grocery stores across the country lifted bans on single-use plastic bags under the idea that bringing your own bag was unsafe. But in fact, the CDC reports that there are no known cases of the virus spreading through surfaces and objects, and numerous research shows that single-use or reusable bags are no better or worse for transmission or prevention of transmission of coronavirus. I've found that, like, I was in Berkeley when everything happened and stayed in here over summer, and like all of the grocery stores were not accepting reusable bags, and everywhere, like anytime I went to a cafe or anything like that, bring your own was not accessible. So with that being said, why even care? Well, our plastic waste is polluting our environment. Nearly everywhere you look, there is some sort of plastic litter in ecosystems where it just doesn't belong. It's so embedded in our environment that there is literally a garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean. And on top of that, research shows that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by weight. But we also shouldn't just consider the implications that plastic pose on the environment, but also on people. Landfills are typically placed in low-income communities or communities of color. Landfills are protected with a plastic liner, but at some point, that toxic liquid leaches out of that liner and into surrounding groundwater. So when we throw our waste away, we are poisoning communities living near landfills as they drink unsafe water supplies. Because plastic is made from petroleum, our use of it degrades the environment and increases global greenhouse gas emissions, thus furthering climate change. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, single-use plastics are not any more sanitary than reusables. So why do we even resort to that as our default? And on the subject of single-use plastics, we must talk about disposable personal protective equipment. So we're running into a few problems. Disposable masks, gloves, and wipes are not recyclable or biodegradable, which is severely polluting our environment. I was actually just visiting home for a few days and found that there were masks and gloves all over the sidewalks and beaches. And it's really, really disappointing and sad to see that. But I also have a few solutions for you. You can wear a reusable mask and just wash it regularly. Use your bare hands instead of using single-use disposable gloves. Wash your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water, as opposed to having those like disposable hand sanitizer bottles. And then if you're on campus, use centralized hand sanitizing stations. But again, all of these are like within your means, and I want to account for accessibility for everybody. But if these apply to you and you can apply them to your life, then please consider these rather than single-use disposable PPE. So I've said a lot of doomsday things, but the point of my presentation is not to scare you or make you feel grim for the future, because in fact, that's exactly the opposite of my point, which is why I'm presenting to you action items. So I implore you to consider the 5 R's in your day-to-day life. So the first R is refuse. So imagine this for all of my students at Berkeley. We're living in a post-COVID world. School is back in session and clubs are scattered across Sproul. As you're walking to class, someone offers you a freebie. It's a reusable water bottle. But no, think about it. You already have like 4 of those at home, so refuse. Let's be honest, you really don't need it. Next, reduce. Reduce your consumption habits and consume only what you need. Next, reuse. When I finish a peanut butter jar, for example, I always keep the container knowing it will be useful at some point. And then the next R is rot or compost. So composting is actually super important because when we send compostable materials to landfill, it produces methane when it decomposes, which is a greenhouse gas that is like 36 times more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term. When we compost and add those nutrients back into our soil, rather than sending them to landfill, the soil has the ability to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. So composting is actually a climate solution on a large scale, which is super cool. And I'm actually going to be presenting at another point this semester to talk about how to compost. So if you're interested in this topic, please come to that Zoom social. And then our last R is recycle. Recycling means sending your cans, bottles, and any paper recycling to the right bins. But you also need to be really careful about contamination. So try to clean your cans and bottles before throwing them away. However, I do want to point out that recycling has essentially stopped happening in the US ever since China stopped accepting our recyclable materials. So in the US here, we don't have the infrastructure to support our recycling, but it's also an environmental justice issue to send it over to developing countries overnight, essentially just assuming that they have that infrastructure themselves. And what usually happens in those countries are it gets incinerated or not disposed of correctly. So those environmental burdens are placed on those people and those communities. So recycling is not a compost or is not a climate solution. And I encourage you to reduce the recyclable items you consume whenever possible. And if you do happen to have some recycled materials, make sure you do recycle them, but understand where that's actually going. I also want to remind you that the 5 Rs are in a hierarchy of importance, and while they are all important, do your best to refuse whenever possible. But outside of the 5 Rs, I encourage you to bring your own whenever possible, or participate in sanitized reuse cup systems like Vessel. So Vessel is a really awesome company. It's located in Boulder, Colorado, and it also has a branch in Berkeley. It's really simple and accessible to use. So all you have to do is go to a participating cafe, sign up on the Vessel website, check out a Vessel cup, and enjoy your drink in a stainless steel reusable mug. The service is entirely free of charge unless you don't return the cup within 5 days, and then it costs $15, but then you get to keep the cup, so you essentially just bought a nice stainless steel cup for $15. Unfortunately, they are currently not operating at the moment due to COVID, but I think they're expecting to start opening up as more cafes open up later this semester. So definitely look out for that in Berkeley if you guys are here, or if you happen to be in Boulder. Also a great resource there. And then when campus reopens, I encourage you to visit the reuse store on campus. It's located in the MLK basement, where everything is $3 or under. So if you're in need, they have shoes, school supplies, clothes, candles, literally just about everything under the sun. I also encourage you to visit thrift stores if it is safe and open, or online thrift stores like ThredUp, Poshmark, and Depop, rather than buying new. There are also lots of refill stations emerging across the US. For example, in Oakland, there's a refill store called Re-Up Refill, where they can deliver products to you via bike. Usually these are like packaged in sustainable packaging or not packaged. You can also pick up curbside from their store, or you can bring your own containers to the store to refill. So they have everything under the sun, from body wash to cleaners to laundry detergents and more. And it's a really great way. If you have like some empty shampoo bottles or something, you can just go to that refill store in Oakland, bring your shampoo bottle, refill it with the shampoo that you want. And it's a really cool company. They also like let you know where all of their products are getting, like who packages them or who makes them, who produces them, what's the environmental cost of them being produced and stuff like that. So there's full transparency about what you're purchasing. So yeah, that's a really great option for people. And then for our long-term action items. So our political leaders dictate a large role in the future of reuse. If you have the privilege or the right of voting, I encourage you to exercise your right and do your research on candidates. This includes looking into how candidates have voted on past environmental issues, if they've taken office before, and who funds their campaign, because these are really important things to understand how they're going to vote in the future. There are plenty of online resources to look into this, like environmental scorecards, which track how your elected officials have looked into or have voted in the past on environmental issues. And then there's also websites like followthemoney.org, which shows how your candidates are funded. You can also participate in local politics and government by attending city council meetings and creating public comments, or going to ASUC meetings, Senate meetings, to also make public comments there. There's also the UC Berkeley Zero Waste Coalition, which is a really great resource for organizations and individuals across campus to help support sustainability efforts. And then I also encourage you to contact your representatives to convince them to advocate for the reversal of bans on reusables if this is applicable to where you live right now. And then lastly, you can look into a really great resource called Californians Against Waste, which is a group that's dedicated to protecting the environment and conserving resources by creating policies and lobbying around these interests. The website is really interesting and helpful to keep up to date on current environmental legislation in California. And now for a hopeful future. Sanitized reuse systems like Vessel, I believe, are the way of the future. They are safer than both single-use disposables and bringing your own, because the whole system from getting them packaged and sent to cafes to getting them washed are all under very strict sanitized systems. So it's really safe, even safer than single-use disposables. I've been seeing a lot of companies with similar missions to Vessel emerge across the United States and globally. So I remain really hopeful for the future in terms of that. Also, corporations must respond to collective organizing. So if we all take action and support reuse as well as refuse single-use plastics, they will be forced to change their production. While we await structural change though, know that change is happening in our own backyard. In April of this year, UC Berkeley committed to the strongest plastic ban in the country. This comprehensive ban will eliminate all non-essential single-use plastics with viable alternatives by 2030. All 9 University of California campuses are phasing out single-use plastics as a part of a commitment to achieve zero waste. The new policy will transition UC away from the plastic bags in retail and dining locations, and also eventually eliminate single-use plastic food service items and plastic bottles. And then there's also the City of Berkeley Single-Use Foodware and Litter Reduction Ordinance, which essentially states that all restaurants in Berkeley cannot have like all of their single-use disposable foodware has to be compostable or recyclable. And then there's also a charge on the customer, a 25-cent charge if you do choose to take a coffee cup, a disposable coffee cup, which is a really great incentive to start bringing your own. And now resources for reuse. So I've mentioned Vessel a few times, but it's only available in Berkeley or Boulder, Colorado. So if these apply to you and you live in either place, this is a really great item or resource for reuse. Also, for those of you living in Berkeley, I encourage you to go to Berkeley Bowl, where you can purchase in bulk and bring your own bags. And on that note, you should try to bring your own bags to the store whenever possible, regardless of where you live or what store you go to, again, if this is applicable and you're allowed to. And then lastly, I implore you to consider the 5 R's and refuse whenever possible, as this will really have the biggest impact. So now for some discussion questions. I think I'm going to try to put you guys into breakout rooms, and then yeah, we'll discuss together. But I don't have an option to put you guys in the breakout room, so never mind, that's not happening. So I guess we can just like have a large group discussion then. So for our first question, can you guys think of any other reuse resources where you live? So something like Vessel. And this is open communication, so if anybody wants to speak up, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
So I was going to jump in. I think I saw in fact, it was a Cal alum. I think there is a program called Dispatch. So they're working with restaurants, and you can get your reusable containers through the restaurant. I think it's in San Francisco, and they're trying to expand at other locations, but you basically order your food to the restaurant, and then you return the reusables back to the restaurant. It's kind of like Vessel, but it's for restaurant and the dishware.
Oh, that's really interesting. Where is that located?
I think they're piloting in San Francisco. Some restaurants are, but the story came out because it was also, I think the person running it is a Cal alum. So it was very interesting.
That's really cool. I didn't know that existed. Awesome. So moving on to the second question, what is the importance of collective action?
I think that collective action is really important because the way that the systems and structures we're in are set up, they're set up for a default way that's like single-use plastics and also a lot of other really harmful things. And in order to, we can't change those systems on an individual level. We can reduce harm, but we can't actually change the systems at an individual level. So that's why collective action is important, especially because individual solutions are not accessible to a lot of people who are already harmed and affected by the system and are marginalized because of that.
Yeah, that's a really important, you have a really important point. Does anybody else have anything to add? So moving on to the next question, I want you all to reflect on the phrase, you vote with your wallet. What does this mean to you, and how will you apply this to your life?
I really like this one. I think it ties into the collective action piece as well. When we, as consumers, collectively choose to make different choices with our money that funds different things. So if we choose to fund companies that produce a lot of single-use plastics, then those companies will continue to be successful. But if we start favoring other things, then not only will those companies not be successful, they might change their actions to produce products that are more sustainable.
I think it also definitely plays in with like demand. Like we pay, like what we buy kind of like indicates like the demand for something. So if we're constantly buying like things with plastics in them, or then like the demand is still there. But if you choose to like pay for other things that like don't have plastic, or like if you support alternatives like stores, then you kind of like make that choice, and then you increase the demand for like those stores who will like promote like reusing or like refilling.
Thank you, guys. That's really awesome. I also like want to give a little like disclaimer that like I think the phrase "you vote with your wallet" is in a form elitist, because I think not everybody has access to buy like the most sustainable or environmentally friendly products. And so a big part of that is like on corporations for creating like I don't know, I guess streamlining things that are sustainable and thus will end up being affordable for people when they're streamlined. But I also understand that like not everybody does have the ability to like put their money in like the best products and the best companies and stuff, because those usually end up being more expensive. And then on the last question, which of the 5 R's is most important to you?
Well, for me, my favorite R is refuse, because mostly because it's the one that like no one really talks about it, but it's really the easiest one to do because um I mean, it's so much easier rather than like going through all the steps, reducing, reusing, recycle, the other one. So much easier just to refuse in the first place and not buy products that you know are gonna have a lasting impact on the earth. A lot of reasons that I hear that people like don't want to do any of the R's is just because it's too inconvenient. But if you think about it, refuse is like more convenient than inconvenient, because then you just don't have to do it. There's always like a good alternative to anything that you can buy in a store. Um, well, in most cases at least, or at least better alternatives. So being conscious of what you buy, um, and this ties back into voting with your wallet, but it makes a really big difference.
I agree. I think like refusing is probably the most important to me as well, but it's also maybe the hardest because I still like, you know, if I'm at like Calapalooza or something and someone's like, oh, get this free water bottle, like I still want it because of the fact that it's like free and it's nice or whatever. But at the end of the day, like I think it's really important to take a step back and consume really only what you need and to be like very intentional with that. Yeah, does anybody else have anything to say?
I just want to add on to Joseph's thing is that, you know, so you had mentioned, Annie, the vote with your wallet, but part of that is just not buying something. You know, sometimes it's tempting, but it doesn't always have to be choosing the more expensive option because you're trying to do something more sustainable or zero waste, but just not buying a certain item because, you know, like a single-use water bottle, it's sometimes really hard. Like, oh, I'm thirsty. There's no other choice. But it's a matter of saying, you know what, I'm just going to avoid buying it. I'm not going to do it. So I think that's the other way to choose is not really just buying the item.
I know they go in an order, but I feel like reuse is the most important to me because it helps me achieve the other ones. So I think it's really all encompassing, but obviously the other ones get more specific. But if you don't like remember reusables or remember to make those choices, then it's hard, like in the moment when you're being handed a disposable item, to say no if you don't have an alternative. So reuse is always needs to be up there.
Well, you're in the right place because this presentation is all about reuse. Anybody else have anything to add? As a follow-up question, this is not included, but which of the 5 R's do you think is hardest for you to achieve?
This kind of goes with what you were saying a little bit earlier, Annie. And it's also the most important, I think. But refusing has been pretty hard for me because I have a very similar mindset. I think a lot of consumers have a similar mindset of like when someone offers you something for free or for cheap or something, it's really hard to like say no to that. And it's exciting to like get something for free. And so I've definitely had to like make adjustments in my life of like really thinking about, do I need this? Do I like what purpose will it serve? And if it doesn't serve like a purpose, or if I really don't need it, then like just being strict with myself and saying no. I think that's something that's been like a challenge, but also important.
Thank you, Lucy. I think at the end of the day, like I agree with that. I totally struggle with that too. And sometimes it's hard to like not feel guilty because I like obviously really care about the planet and I really care about people and how my actions might impact both. But at the end of the day, like everybody is imperfect. And so there's that one quote that like about, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like zero waste, like you don't have to be perfectly zero waste. Like you have to have like millions of people being perfectly imperfect, you know, and like that's what's like, that's not exactly how the quote goes, but like, you know, the same idea where like we shouldn't feel like guilty when we like sometimes make like maybe the not most like conscious decisions and not the best decisions, but like overall it's important that in our day-to-day life we try to be more intentional and try to be more conscious. Does anybody else have anything to add? Sarah brought up a really great point in the chat that it's important to remember not to take on the full burden of the world's problems as yourself. Exactly, like it's individual action is really important, but at the end of the day, like it's not all on us as individuals to make change. It's structural change, it's systemic change, but as individuals, we are a part of that, but that burden should not fall entirely on us. I think like there's this really cool statistic. I think it's like 1 in 5 people globally are vegetarian. And so like I'm one of those people, and me not eating meat doesn't make a direct impact. Like me personally not eating meat does not make a direct impact on the meat industry. But if those like millions of people started eating meat, that would create a very different demand and a very different change for meat and would entirely change the landscape of our world. And so whenever I get down on myself because I'm like, oh, like I brought my reusable set, but like nobody else did, you know, like that my like impact doesn't make a difference. When you think of it that way, like sure, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but when you think of it large scale and how many people across the world are making the same differences and the same changes that you are making, that will globally make a really big and structural change.
I also think on that note, like I think just having the individual mindset of like, oh, I'm being sustainable in this moment can like when you bring that with you everywhere. So like let's say like you work at like a big company and like you end up working in the meat industry or something, you will take that consciousness like to that place, and then hopefully like you'll be able to like spark a change like in that large movement. So I think it's just like the mindset for me is like why I'm like being so sustainable is like I just have that conscious mindset. So whenever I go in the future, I always bring that with me and hopefully like, make a change in that institution.
Yeah, exactly. Does anybody else have anything else to add? Alrighty, I think we'll move on. So if anybody has any questions for me, this is your time to ask, or you are welcome to email me at any point. But so one of my colleagues is going to be presenting a really awesome Zoom social on global environmental justice implications for plastics. It's going to be next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. 1 to 2 p.m. PST. And then lastly, thank you guys all for attending. So if anybody has any questions, you can email me, or you can also check out our website at zerowaste.berkeley.edu, our Facebook, or our Instagram, which the links for those are down below too. So yeah, that's it for my presentation. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to stick around, but thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope you learned something.
Thank you, Annie.
Bye. Thank you guys.